Welcome to The Decision from Nashville EO, where you will hear the rest of the story after tough decisions were made by entrepreneurs who faced adversity and lived to tell about it.
Welcome to The Decision, EO Nashville. You'll find us at eonashville.com. We are a podcast by entrepreneurs for entrepreneurs where we talk about all the things that we deal with as we're building and growing and running businesses, the wins, the losses, the decisions, which is why we're here talking about those decisions, how we make them, how we use EO to make those decisions, and what the outcome is, good, bad, ugly, and otherwise. And with me, as always, today, Mr. Robert Hartline.
Thank you once again. Love to see you, Eric.
Good to see you. And Kriste Goad is our guest today. And we have not interacted much in the past, but we have something in common. I had a business partner once. And I know we're going to talk about that today, right?
We are, yes.
How was that experience for you?
It was a roller coaster, and ultimately very difficult.
That's uncommon.
Probably with a business. I don't know. I was open about that many years ago when I still had a business partner, and he's still a good friend. Ultimately, it didn't work. And so I love that we're going to get to talk about this today, because after I talked about that publicly, I had people come to me and say, "Hey, I've got the same issue. How can I figure this out?" Mm-hmm. And so I love that you're going to be able to talk about this today.
Yeah. Well, thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah. Glad you're here.
I'm glad to be here.
All right. Let's dig in.
Let's do it.
Mr. Roberts, he's the question master here. I'm just here for color.
Well, let's go back to the very beginning. Before you ever had a business partner, before you had people on the team, what inspired you to get into marketing, for one?
Well, like much of my career, it has just been, sort of as opportunities have come up, I've taken those paths. I started my professional career as a newspaper reporter. I was a journalism major. And in doing that, I ended up covering politics right here in Nashville in the state of Tennessee. And then when I left journalism, I had the opportunity to go on the road during one of it was the 1994 race for governor here in Tennessee. And so I traveled the whole state with both the Democratic and the Republican candidate for that whole campaign. And so, you get to know people when you're out on the road and spend that much time together. And so the sitting governor at the time, it was Governor Don Sundquist at the time, and my good friend Beth Fortune, we had been reporters together at the old Nashville Banner, and she was the governor's press secretary. And I, called her quite often to get quotes, on different things. And she had just made a comment to me that, hey, if you ever get out of journalism, give me a call, you might have opportunities. And so that happened, and I called her and ended up going into speech writing. I'd never done that before. And then from there, the governor's term was up, and I was looking for my next opportunity. And there happened to be an opportunity in-house leading corporate communications for a healthcare company here in town, here in Nashville, called Healthways. That was at the time the largest publicly traded disease management company in the country. It doesn't even exist in that name, anymore. But from there, I ended up going to work. I left there and went to work for an agency here in town, a small public affairs, PR marketing shop. And then from there, got recruited into a larger healthcare focused marketing shop. And then the way that I ended up owning my own business is I basically got fired.
That happens.
Yeah, that's a good way to start a business.
I know. Yeah. But, when I was at that firm, we ended up getting acquired by a large global agency. So it was kind of a natural, progression out and when that kind of thing happens. But I had been there I had the opportunity to be the chief marketing officer, chief marketing business development. So I really learned marketing. I really knew PR and, journalism and communications, but I really learned marketing on the job. I took a chance. I said, I think I can do that. That sounds fun. And so that's what I did. And that's kind of how I got into owning my own business, kind of had a choice at that point, what to do. And I thought I would take a bet on myself, and see how it goes. And that's how I got here.
Well, you skipped over something I'm super curious about. I have not stopped thinking about it. As a young reporter in Nashville, what was your best story?
Well, that's a really great question. I was really most proud of literally some of the coverage of that 1994 political race, because a lot of people might not remember this, but that was actually what they called the Republican Revolution. That's when Newt Gingrich came into power and the Republicans in Tennessee took over for the first time since Reconstruction. So I just felt like I felt proud of the work I had done and during that campaign and really covering both sides. And that's probably that. I would say I also worked at the Commercial Appeal in Memphis for about 4 years after that. And there was one story that there's a couple that stand out, but one that I was thinking about recently, I've had the opportunity to do some pretty wild and amazing things. And one of those was I was in the newsroom one morning and the editors looked around. I just happened to be there early and they got a call and there was an Amtrak train derailment, the city of New Orleans, and it was in Illinois. So they looked around and I was the reporter sitting there and they said, hey, we're going to put you on a flight up there, to be on site. I'm like, okay. So I went up there and turned out there were some families from Memphis that were on that train and that were killed in the train derailment. So it was actually a crash. There was a car that went over the tracks. But anyway, not a situation or a story you want to necessarily, you ever see yourself going into, but, just by circumstance, I was on site and, there was a lot going on because it was a big deal. A lot of people were killed. And I didn't have much luck on site because of so many people, but I was there with a photographer and we ended up going to the Cracker Barrel, just to get some food. And it turned out sitting next to us at the table was the family members that had come in. Their family members had been killed in the train wreck and they were the people from Memphis.
Wow.
And I just happened to hear them and happened to ask them if they would tell me their story and they agreed to. And, that was a really powerful moment and it's a difficult time, but that's, I was young. I didn't know what I was doing, very much, but, just kind of like one of those standout moments in time and stories. Yeah.
Wow. So your business, as you started out, was there a client that really helped you along the way to have the business sustain for a minute?
Absolutely. Yes. My very first healthcare client was a company called eMids, and they are a Nashville-based company with a very large presence in India. They're basically like outsourced. They started out as outsourced technology and developers for the healthcare industry. So I got a call from a friend of mine there, Mike Hollis, and he needed some help on basically some thought leadership and speaker prep for an annual conference they do, the eMids Health Summit. And so that's how I started working with them. And then they became like my largest and longest standing client for several years, the first probably 5 years of the company. So, a lot of gratefulness, to Mike and Sarab and the whole team at eMids. And, I didn't understand what they did, at the beginning, because there's a lot of complexity, in that space and what they do. But I learned so much about healthcare technology working with them. And, Mike and Sarah are great people, and were really great to work with, and just afforded us a lot of opportunity in that time.
What do you see that entrepreneurs struggle with trying to talk about their message? Like if you're helping people doing a talk and speak about their products, what do you see that they generally do wrong when they do it themselves?
Well, I think probably the biggest thing is maybe not telling their story, in the right way, and spending too much time talking about the product, and talking marketing speak rather than talking about the why behind it and the people behind it and, the passion behind it. And
do they want to talk about what the widget does?
A lot of times they want to talk about, well, here's our product. Why doesn't everybody want to know about it? But people want to know, well, they want to know you understand their problem, and they want to know that you can help them, and a lot of times people are making a decision to spend their money with you, and they're hoping that you can solve a problem for them and not make them look bad. So I think, when you can connect on that personal level and you can trust that person and really, or that the people behind the company, that's what I like to try to get to. And especially if I love the notion of like brand storytelling and brand journalism. Not many companies invest in brand journalism. But I think there's so much value there because it's hard to get the media environment out there right now there's so many channels and so much noise and so many avenues, yet like so few actual real journalists out there covering stories, and they're getting bombarded left and right, that there's an opportunity for companies to invest money to actually tell their stories in an editorial journalistic way that is much more compelling to the buyer, in my opinion,
So in your business, as you're starting out and you're starting to scale and starting to add people, was there a moment in time where you're like, oh, this is a lot more work than I anticipated, where you needed some extra manpower?
Yes.
Tell me about that.
Well, I mean, when I started, it was just me at my kitchen table, literally. And then in the whole first year, it was just me. Anything that I wouldn't be able to do or didn't have an expertise in, but clients needed help with, I'm like, oh, I can help you. I know someone. Let me see if so-and-so is available, And so it was really just me reaching out to my network and bringing in freelance partners, 1099s. And that's, how I scaled and grew and delivered work for the first 2 years, really, of the company. And that is how one of my kind of first, I started calling them permalancers, because it was freelancers that were friends of mine and in my network and people I had worked with before, knew and trusted, and they knew and trusted me. And, I counted them as members of my team, even though, they weren't employed by me, I wasn't like paying a salary or benefits or anything. But going into 2018, started, at the tail end of 2017, really, just put a shingle out. Going into 2018, I had emids, and then I picked up another client. And as a result, I really needed some help. And so I had reached out to a friend of mine who had been on my team previously at another agency. And she was just really talented and really great. And I knew she was not happy in the job that she was in at that time. And so I said, hey, you're not happy. I need the help. I know we'll work well together. I can keep you in the lifestyle you've become accustomed to for at least the next 6 months. What do you have to lose? Give it a try. And so she agreed to, and that became, not my business partner, it wasn't like a partnership on paper, but that was my partner that we really worked day to day, day in, day out from the kitchen table and, built it together. Yeah. from pretty much the ground up.
Mm. Now, when did you discover EO and add that to your entrepreneurial equation?
Well, interestingly, when I decided to start my own business, I'd never done this before. So I did what I normally do, as a curious reporter. I go out and I start talking to people and interviewing people. So I just started lining up meetings, with friends, and then networking with other people to have other meetings and just say, hey, here's what I'm going to do. And what advice do you have? What am I not thinking about? And every conversation I would have, somebody would ask a question that would make me think of, I hadn't thought of that before. So that's really what I did. Can you remind me of the question again?
Yeah. So when did you hear about EO
EO, yeah. So as part of that process, I've had to learn to keep my focus and say no to a lot more things, because I'm typically like, oh, you want to have a meeting? Yeah, let's have a meeting. Who knows what I'll learn? And who knows, this may be a lifelong friendship or a next opportunity. And I'm just a very extroverted. I'm an extreme extrovert, and I love to, learn new things. So once I got going, I kept up that process of meeting with people, reaching out to people that reached out to me. I'm like, yeah, let's meet. And so several of the people that I was meeting with were in EO or, and told me about it, and I didn't know anything about it. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. So I looked at it, and then I, first was not eligible. I had not met that revenue criteria. And so I was looking at Catalyst originally. I learned about Catalyst through EO, and I went to some meetings to learn more about that. And while I was super interested and wanted that experience, I was just like in a place where I didn't feel like I could commit the time. And I know it is, you got to be committed to it to get anything out of it. So I never did Catalyst, but I, was always super interested. And then kind of before you know it, I was at that 1 million mark and felt that I really needed that group of fellow entrepreneurs. And so one of my friends, Robin Davis, who's in EO, and I knew she was a member, I reached out to her and asked her about it. And so she recommended me, and that's how I ended up joining EO.
And you landed in an unbelievable forum.
And I landed in this incredible forum, that has helped me make a lot of decisions for sure. And helped me, I think.
I say that just because she is in my forum.
I assumed as much.
Yes. Robert helps us all be more vulnerable.
Mm-hmm. You got me earlier today.
Yeah, whoa, that was a tough one. No, so back to being in forum, maybe talk about a powerful decision that you kind of brought to forum that you struggled with that other people may resonate with.
Well, I feel like people will resonate with this because every time I've shared it in any EO capacity, everybody shakes their head and gives me the same advice or gave me the same advice on it. And when I first joined EO, I felt like I was in a very difficult spot. I didn't know the right thing to do. And when I joined, it was at a time that the partner that I've referenced, we had just gotten to a point in our relationship where it had deteriorated, and we weren't able to have the right conversations. I definitely was not able to have the right conversations, at that time, and was feeling very conflicted because, this person was critical to the business and had really, been there in lockstep and helped me grow the business. And, I really didn't know what to do. So that was the issue that I brought to the table. That was the first issue I brought to Forum when I joined. And just for some context, I joined EO. It'll be 2 years ago. Well, it's actually 2 years ago this month. And then joined Forum, I think about June of that same year. And this was during sort of my orientation to EO. We kind of did some mock, sessions I brought this issue to that session, and like 3 different people around the table shared their experience about being in that exact same boat and what they did. And those were very powerful. So I brought that to the actual forum when I got in the forum, and the experience shares were all the same, that I had heard from other EO members up until that point, which is it's painful, but the longer you put it off, the more painful it's going to be. And the right decision, and you just, you need to make the decision. So that was helpful to hear. And it was helpful to hear how other people had handled that exact same decision. Although most of the ones, they were actual business partners on paper. So there was a lot more to unravel, legally and, financially and everything than there was for me. But it really helped me mainly get the courage to do what I felt like I needed to do, which, was part ways, go a different direction, and to deal with the fallout, whatever it may be, because, I felt like at least now I had, a group of fellow entrepreneurs, that I could call on, and they knew what I was going through, and just the, emotional and mental anguish that's involved in something like that is so, I think people on your team can't imagine. I don't know that there's an empathy there about, how it really impacts you as a human. But it's a really big decision, and there's a lot of angst and anxiety and, fear and
what was heavier, carrying the decision around or making the decision?
I'm going to say those were pretty equal from my perspective. But it did feel like a relief once I made the decision that I was going to act on it.
For the moment you were like, the moment you decided and then having a conversation, how long was that time period?
Probably 3 months.
Mm-hmm. Why did it take 3 months?
Probably because I was just afraid.
Yeah. Did the fear,
and I was, also like, rightly or wrongly, I was trying to get some things in place, and probably trying to control things that I didn't have any control over, realistically. But I did feel like, okay, well, if I'm going to do this, I need to try to have some, more senior people in place and some folks in place that could help, bridge the gap.
So what was the outcome of finally making that decision? Was it as bad as you thought it was going to be? Or worse?
It was way worse.
It was way worse.
Yeah. It was way worse from the standpoint. It was great, ultimately, and I stand by it, and it was the best decision, long term. But it was worse from the standpoint of kind of the fallout, with the rest of the team, and I guess the way it all, happened. And rebuilding the team and kind of rebuilding culture and just overall impact. I think, I thought, okay, it's probably about a 6-month deal, but it's really been more of like a, I'm probably still making pivots right now, as a result. And it took a lot longer.
Yeah.
I would say instead of 6 months, it's the kind of thing that could take 2 years, ultimately. Because in reality, what ended up happening is I basically, did blow up the company and did, kind of rebuild.
Mm. Yeah. The question is it easier to work with people you like and better for your sanity? Or do we ignore the fact that we maybe don't get along or work well with someone and keep something bad going? Even though, it's like this financial.
I think it's a great question.
This financial thing that you kind of decide on culture. Like I remember I had this sales guy, crushed sales. Like this guy brought in the business of 5 people but he was toxic to the whole company. And I struggled with that, having to make that decision on somebody that brings in a lot of money, maybe.
Right. I mean, it's a great question. I think that I think you can absolutely be successful and be in business with and, achieve your goals with people that maybe you don't necessarily like or totally get along with. As long as you're able to have that conversation and both, understand and agree that, hey, this is what it is. And we don't have to love each other and like get along and spend all of our free time together to be able to be successful in business and in business partnership. I think that can happen, but I think it takes a lot of maturity on both parties to be able to do something like that and to be able to keep an open mind, about each other and just be radically transparent and honest, probably with each other, and with the team, to a certain degree. So I think it can be done. I think it can happen. I think it's challenging, for that to happen. Ideally, everybody gets along and it's kumbaya and you love everybody you work with. I think it makes it a lot easier, to really like people you work with, and be able to just agree to disagree on certain things. But for the most part, as long as you have that respect and you're not undermining one another.
If you could do that whole experience over again, how would you do the same thing? Or would you navigate that any differently?
I think I would navigate it differently. I think now, year and a half later, I have new tools, at my disposal. I have a more clear perspective on myself and others. I think, when you're wrapped up into a lot of like the pain of that day-to-day kind of situation, it's hard to see things clearly. And, it's hard to know sometimes the right conversations to have. I always admire people that are able to have the right conversations, with the right tone and with the right emotion and but also the right boundaries and the right strength and conviction. You have to have all of those things. So I'd say I'm still learning, to be really good at all of those kinds of things. So I would, if I had to do it over again, I would be able to take what I now know about being able to have those kind of conversations and would have tried that, a little bit more
earlier. Like, earlier, I don't know about if you guys noticed how, as you do this entrepreneurial game longer, when you first face the uncomfortable opportunity that you need to say something uncomfortable to someone, you can do it with a new person, but it's so hard to do with somebody you've known for a while because you're going to totally surprise them when you're like, I don't like this,
Yeah.
There's that scar tissue around it.
And I got to tell you, in this situation, like anytime, we would have difficult or uncomfortable conversations, it would just escalate very, very quickly. And, just got to the point where I was like, okay, we're just not going to have these conversations.
Oh yeah. So we'll just ignore it.
We'll just
move on.
Because I'm not going to have this conversation anymore.
Which makes the culture suffer.
Yes.
Because now nobody is able to have conversations in the way they should, right?
Yes. And interestingly enough, I would have thought that it was so glaringly obvious to everyone. But what I learned afterward was that a lot of people didn't realize that, we were even at odds.
So the kids in the background didn't know that you and your partner, and I say kids, I'm using
the kids didn't know mom and dad were fighting.
Here. Right.
Yeah. So
and at some point that came to light.
I'm like, wow, how could no one pick up on that? Like it seemed pretty obvious to me, but I guess, we did a good job, on certain level.
Right.
just keeping the business going and operating, and not bringing a lot of that to the office every day. So that was really surprised about that.
Usually people pick up on it and they know how to navigate around it. And
they probably did pick up on, like maybe some animosity but like maybe didn't realize the degree, maybe that's.
So when you had conversations with your team later, how did they acknowledge the split? How did they take it? What was the fallout?
There was a lot of, like, I would say, shock and awe, that happened. And it was a little bit of a scorched earth sort of approach that ended up happening, which was unfortunate and super painful. Yeah. So, we had several people leave as a result, and some of those, that was good.
Right.
But, it had really just become a little bit of an us versus them that was going on behind the scenes to a degree that I wasn't fully aware of.
Right. How has the environment changed today?
Well, we have a whole new team. Basically, that was 2022. So we've had like 100% turnover, not all at once.
Right.
But over the course of that time. So that's been good and bad as well. It's like having been here from the start, I have the institutional memory of how we do things and how we've done things in the past, or how we approach, we get a new engagement. Oh yeah, we've done this before. And then I have to always remind myself, well, this particular team
right
together hasn't done this before. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And you become the institutional vault.
I know, which could be really, dangerous.
Right. And you feel like you're explaining the obvious, right?
I do. And it's really been helpful for me to take a step back and keep that in mind and remember that, and, I think any head of a company, it is a bit of a, kind of going back to my political days, like it is a bit of a political message. You got to kind of stay on message, and here's what we stand for, and here's what we believe in, and here's our values. And here's the history of the store, the company, and here's why we do what we do. And, here's our relationship with this client, like there's a lot of storytelling that goes on that you have to keep doing. You can never get tired of telling that story. And maybe that kind of answers your question earlier a little bit, Robert, like that is your job to continue, because nobody else knows it like you do, like know it. And don't assume that people have heard it, or if they've heard it once, twice, 3 times, that they even remember it. And so I think that is also a challenge for an entrepreneur, is we always like that next shiny object. And, it's like we're constantly learning and curious and going new directions and having new ideas, but also keeping in mind that it is our job to be that institutional memory and voice and storyteller.
To have that touch of dementia where you tell the same story again and again.
Right. I'm like, I don't know if I've told you this before. Stop me if I've said this before.
I bet you see that in a lot of the clients that you work with. They've forgotten their own story too.
They do. They forget their own story. And I also find, especially being in marketing and communications, and I, coach the team, hey, here's the deal. Our clients are moving really fast. They have a lot of things going on any given day. That goes for the CEO to the head of marketing to the head of PR, whoever we're dealing with. I believe it's our job to always sort of like set the tone. Let me remind you while we're here. Let me remind you why we're going this direction. This is based on this strategy and these messages and these things that we've agreed on, and level, every time, like level set if you need to, here's the context of this meeting. Here's the context of this decision. Here's why we're doing it this way. Because people forget. I forget in my own agency, like, okay, guys, remind me, like we have our own agency marketing plan, and, people on the team are helping execute against that. And I'm like, okay, remind me what we decided on XYZ, because, my computer memory is kind of filled up, and I can tend to forget that. And I think it's, that staying on message, staying on track, not getting frustrated when you're having to sort of remind someone, here's why we're here. Here's why I'm asking you to do this. Here's why I'm asking this question. Here's why I need you to tell this story in this way.
We forget that sometimes too, that they don't do this work every day.
Right.
So we have to remind them of what role we play and what role they need to play in the work that we're doing together.
Yes.
In order for it to be successful. And we feel sometimes like we're being almost parental. It
feels frustrating.
Yeah.
I know I find myself getting frustrated and like, wait a minute, we've talked about this like 6 times. Why am I the only one that remembers it?
And then we go back to our communications training of you got to repeat it 7 times before.
7 times,
before people hang. It's probably more now that we're overwhelmed with so much media.
So much information all the time. I don't know about you guys, but like, I'm like, oh, that's a great article. I'm going to remember that. And then like, the next day, I can't even remember where I read it, where I sent it to myself, where I flagged it, much less what I was going to say about it,
How many screenshots I've taken with my phone?
Oh, yeah.
I've never gotten back and even
never got back to it.
Yeah.
You're like, I'm going to screenshot. That's going to be very important.
Was there another decision that you needed help with Forum, or something that you've helped navigate through over the last couple of years?
Yes. For a while, I felt like I was I'm like, hey, if anyone else has an issue, don't let me take up all the air in the room. It's a great question.
Probably time to bring your prop out.
Oh, about my feelings?
She's got the most incredible pillow. You got to show this on video.
It's going to resonate.
This is wonderful.
This is the feelings wheel pillow, and it's on both sides. And Laura Samper on my team, she gives me great gifts. She gave me this for Christmas, and I was like, this is so amazing. So, we all kind of know like those main sort of, this has fear, anger, disgust, sad, happy, surprise, but like going deeper. Like when we have to check in at the beginning of a forum meeting, like, well, how are you feeling? Like, and, don't just say, I feel fear, you go a bit deeper and like, well, in what way? And this is like, oh, I feel humiliated, rejected, insecure, anxious, scared. And then you go deeper and like, what does that lead to? What does that make you feel? Inferior, inadequate, overwhelmed, imposter syndrome, as we all, I'm sure experience.
It never happens to me.
Never happens.
No.
So I have all of these. I also, I'll share.
I want one of those pillows, by the way. I think you can. I need a couple.
I think you can get it on the interweb.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Send me a link that'll get buried in my email.
Robert took a picture of it earlier, and he'll never go back to that picture.
No, I will get it. I will get this.
Okay. Yes.
Anyway, this is great. And then you can hug it when you're feeling
sad or ashamed.
Or whatever. Sometimes I have it on the floor and my cat sleeps on it. Very, very, useful.
That's terrific. And we should put that in the show notes.
There we go. We will put that with our affiliate link.
I felt like bringing a prop was,
yeah.
So question, what advice would you give a new EO member? Not we're giving advice, but what experience share would you give them to help them have a fulfilled experience being in EO so they get the most out of having a forum set up? And
well, for me, I will do the experience sharing. For me, it has been, I get the most out of EO by taking advantage of a lot of the like professional development and learning events that they put on, whether it's a webinar or like last year I went to an event. It was like an executive Harvard for a day kind of thing at Belmont, which was really cool. And, just kind of taking advantage of those learning opportunities, because there's stuff that that's what I'm paying for, are those kind of opportunities. And they're so good, I wouldn't be able to access them on my own. As well as I also like the social, aspect of it. Like I said, I'm an extreme extrovert, so a lot of fun events. So I think, if that's what floats your boat, like really take advantage of those. And even if it doesn't, get outside your comfort zone. Because by doing that, that's when you really meet other EO members as well, especially members outside of your forum. And then I'll raise my hand for other, different things. You and I went to a session just a few weeks ago where we were looking at forum health. And,
it was a great session.
It was a great session. Colton did a great job leading that and leading by example.
He's going to get the big
I know
head.
he's kind of got a big head anyway. Yeah. But that was a great session, and I still need to type up my notes to share with our forum, because I said I would do that and I haven't done it yet, but so much good to share there. From a forum standpoint, absolutely get in a forum, and even if it ends up being not a perfect fit down the line, like you can always switch forums, that's what they say, and you can, and people do. But get in a forum and share and get vulnerable and, do the retreats, do the things, participate, be involved, and do the coaching, bring your issue to the table. And, I love that you can bring the issue to the table and everyone can experience, share, and you can walk away with some things. But then you can also, if you hear something that you want to dive deeper on, that you can say, hey, I know we're not here to give advice, but I really want your advice because that's really hitting home with me and I really need to know more. That's really helpful. And then, I can't tell you how many times, I have then, just one-on-one conversations as issues pop up, with forum members. And it's so helpful, to do that. And I think just really leveraging, I always try to answer all the surveys that EO sends out after the events to give feedback on it, because I know it's helpful and they take that to heart. So one thing I would love to do is actually participate in a catalyst, because as an EO member, you're able to do that. And I haven't done that yet. But I think anybody that comes to EO and hasn't done that, that's probably a good thing. Something I hope to do someday.
I highly recommend it. I did it myself and then ended up moderating, I think, 4 different forums. Changed my life. It's a good thing.
I would like the forum moderation is a big commitment. And we've got a great moderator for our forum.
You end up in 2 forums at that point.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, but I do see, especially after going to that event, a few weeks ago, like that's a real growth opportunity, and a service opportunity. And,
you learned so much by doing to that.
Well, when I was first asked to do it, my first thought was, well, I don't know anything. What am I going to tell these newbies? And then you hear them talk for the first time. It's like, oh my God, let me tell you how I've done it, what my experience was. And it's just, there's so much that you have this unconscious competence. And once you hear somebody else's problem and you get to share, it makes huge impact.
Huge impact. Now that is one thing you guys were asking earlier, if I would have done anything differently, with that earlier decision I was talking about. And like one thing that I would have done differently, knowing what I know now, is I would have gone to the EO and the forum much more with that and dove deeper with people. Hey, you said you went through this. Tell me how you did it. Tell me how I can have it be a situation where it's a win-win. Like how can I come out of this without burning bridges or relationships or, I would have gotten more information. I would have asked for people to share more with me is what I would have done, differently.
Kriste, thank you for joining us today.
Thank
I really
you.
appreciate it.
Is our time up already?
It flies by.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
So listen, if you are like Kriste here, budding entrepreneur, needing to belong to a tribe, that's what we get to do in EO is really come together as a forum, navigate the difficult challenges of making important decisions. You may want to check out eonashville.com. There's 350 local people here in Nashville that are navigating this entrepreneurial journey, and we would love to have you come visit us at some point to see if this is a tribe for you. Thanks for watching and have a fantastic rest of the day.
Thanks for listening to the Decision Podcast by Nashville EO. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.